Ukraine turned an anti-tank missile into a drone killer. It's not a Patriot replacement, and it was never trying to be. But we need to talk about it. Most people don't know that Hellfire is an acronym. It stands for Heli-borne Laser Fire and Forget Missile, and the AGM in front of it is its official name. AGM-114 stands for Air-to-Ground Missile, built to punch through a tank's reactive armor and keep going through the hull underneath. Well, last week, Ukraine's 302nd Anti-Aircraft Missile Brigade formally unveiled a system that straps that exact missile to the back of a Dutch military cargo truck, pairs it with a compact radar, and uses it to shoot drones out of the sky. And here's the part almost nobody covering this story is explaining correctly. This isn't a workaround. It isn't an improvised battlefield hack born of desperation. The missile physically doesn't care what the label on the crate says. From a pure physics standpoint, a missile only needs 5 things: a sensor, guidance, speed, a warhead, and a launcher. Well, Hellfire already had 4 of those 5 nailed down for air-to-air use before Ukraine ever touched it. What Ukraine actually did was find the fastest, cheapest, most practical way to turn an anti-tank missile designed in the 1980s into a routine wartime air defense system. At a moment when every Patriot Interceptor on Earth is spoken for and Ukraine needs something, anything, that can reach up and kill a fast-moving drone tonight.
Confidence is high. I repeat, confidence is high.
Hey friends, Wes here, defense journalist, Army and Air Force veteran, law grad, and today we're taking apart a Ukrainian system called Stash. So here's the assumption baked into most weapons coverage, and it's exactly backwards for this story. The instinct is to treat a weapon's official designation as a hard boundary. Air to ground means air to ground. Anti-tank means anti-tank. The label describes what the thing is for. Well, that's not actually how missile physics works. A missile is a sensor, a guidance package, a motor, a warhead, and a launch mechanism, bundled together and pointed at wherever the sensor and guidance package can actually track. The US Navy's own public fact sheet already states Hellfire can function as an air-to-air weapon against helicopters and slow fixed-wing aircraft. Some countries in the Middle East have already been using Apache-launched Hellfires against drones, including a documented shoot-down of a Hezbollah drone near the Syrian border. In September of 2024, during the Red Sands exercise in Saudi Arabia, an AH-64D Longbow Apache tracked a hostile drone with its own radar and killed it with what officials strongly implied was this exact missile variant of the Hellfire. The surprising part is what happens when you strip the missile away from the helicopter entirely and bolt it to whatever chassis you have sitting around. In Ukraine's case, not only did they put it on a pretty bad buggy, but they also put it on a Dutch chassis. Let me walk you through the hardware because the engineering here is clever. Stash pairs the AGM-114L Longbow Hellfire with a compact radar widely identified as belonging to the Rada family, mounted on a Dutch-built DAF YA4442 military cargo truck. Now, Ukraine's 302nd Anti-Aircraft Missile Brigade just formally unveiled this configuration last week, but it's not the system's first appearance. The same basic missile and radar package has already shown up mounted on a trailer and a civilian Ford F-350 pickup truck operated separately by Ukraine's 208th Anti-Aircraft Missile Brigade, which has already used the pickup-mounted version to intercept jet-powered Shahed and Duran attack drones that Ukraine's slower propeller-driven Interceptor drones physically can't catch. Each chassis serves a different tactical need. A trailer parks well next to a fixed asset like a power station or an airfield. A pickup favors speed and dispersal and fast relocation after firing, exactly the kind of shoot-and-scoot profile that keeps a crew alive under Russian counter-battery attention. A proper military cargo truck brings better off-road capability, more onboard electrical power, room for reload missiles, and easier integration into an existing air defense unit's logistics chain. What actually matters isn't which vehicle Ukraine picks, it's that the missile and radar package itself is functionally vehicle agnostic, something crews can bolt onto whatever platform happens to be available, and durable enough for the mission in front of them. Now, here's the specific engineering detail that makes this work against a moving aircraft rather than just a stationary tank on the ground. Most Hellfires guide themselves with a laser. Someone paints the target with a designator, and the missile chases the reflected light home for the entire flight. Well, that works beautifully against the tank sitting in a tree line. It gets a little bit harder against a moving aircraft in darkness or smoke because someone has to keep a narrow laser beam locked onto a moving target continuously for the full duration of the missile's flight. The longbow variant throws that requirement out entirely. It carries its own active millimeter wave radar in the nose. The missile launches with a rough target picture already loaded in, flies the first leg on inertial guidance alone, then switches on its own radar seeker to find, lock, and finish the intercept without anyone holding a laser beam on anything. So a laser-guided Hellfire needs a human staring at the drone the entire time. A longbow Hellfire carries the hardest, last part of that job in its own guidance system. Now, the millimeter wave seeker was originally built to punch through battlefield smoke and darkness to find armored vehicles hiding underneath cover. Now, those same all-weather qualities happen to be exactly what you want when the target is a Shahed instead of a T-72. Also, the Rada family ground radar has a specific difficult job to do before anything gets fired, and it's worth explaining because this is where most coverage gets vague. There's a real distinction between a radar noticing something and a radar being confident enough in what it noticed to authorize a shot. A search quality return tells a crew something might be out there. A fire control quality track tells the weapon precisely where that object is going to be after the missile has already left the rail. The sequence runs something like this. The ground radar picks up the drone and builds a track over several seconds, incorporating position, altitude, heading, and speed. A fire control system checks whether that track falls inside Hellfire's actual launch envelope. Target data then passes to the missile, the launcher fires, the missile flies its first leg on inertial guidance toward a calculated intercept point, then activates its own radar seeker to search the expected volume of sky, find the drone, and correct itself home. The missile doesn't fly toward where the drone currently is. By the time it arrives, the drone is moved. So the fire control system has to calculate an intercept point using the target's speed, its heading, and altitude alongside the missile's own acceleration, flight time, and launch angle. Then send the missile toward that future meeting point rather than the current one. It's like throwing a football to a receiver aiming for the spot where the receiver and the ball will arrive at the same moment, except this particular football carries its own radar and stays religiously committed to correcting your throw on the way there. Against a Shahed specifically, that's a manageable problem. The drone is slow, it flies a comparatively stable route, and can't maneuver aggressively even if Russian operators wanted it to. It's basically like a flying piano. The Ukrainian Stash exists because of a very specific, very recent Russian adaptation. Now, a standard piston engine Duran 2 flies around 180 to 185 kilometers per hour, slow enough that Ukraine's existing fleet of cheap interceptor drones can catch and kill it reliably. Russia has started fielding jet-powered versions of the same airframe capable of pushing past 500 kilometers per hour. A jet-powered Duran simply outruns anything Ukraine can chase down with another propeller-driven interceptor drone. However, remember my recent video about Quantum Systems developing a record-breaking interceptor drone going face-meltingly fast. So the interceptor drones are getting faster and faster, and eventually they're going to exist in the quantity able to handle even these jet-powered Duran 2s. But for now, that is a gap in Ukraine's defensive layer, and it's exactly the gap Stash was built to plug. Now, Ukraine's 208th Brigade has already used the pickup-mounted version of the same package as I mentioned, specifically against jet-powered Shahed and Duran variants that outrun anything else in the interceptor inventory. A closely related American-built architecture called Tempest, running a similar Hellfire and radar package from the company V2X, has destroyed at least 21 Shahed-type drones by January of this year. Stash looks like Ukraine taking that same basic concept and distributing it across a cheaper, more available vehicle fleet at a moment when Patriot interceptors are scarce across the entire Western alliance, and something has to fill the gap against the fastest drones Russia is now fielding. Now, I need to tell you about the first time I saw a Hellfire strike in person. Early 2000s, Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Our unit was gearing up for its first Iraq rotation. I was the video nerd in the company, filming training on an 8mm camcorder, and I talked our commander into letting me tag along during a live fire exercise. First platoon was running at Battle Drill 5, knocking out a bunker roughly 200 meters out. We marked the position with smoke. A few minutes later, I heard it. An Apache roaring in low, and I saw the Hellfire hit literally while members of the platoon were firing their own AT-4 rockets into the same bunker at nearly the same instant. Concrete dust was still hanging in the air as the assault element then moved in. That was the missile doing exactly what it was designed to do. Now, 20-ish years later, I'm covering the same missile family reaching up into the sky over a Ukrainian tree line to find an Iranian-designed drone built in a Russian factory, guided there by a radar bolted to the back of a Dutch cargo truck. That's a bit of a weird way to get here. The weapon hasn't actually changed much. Same rocket motor, same fins, same core logic. Somebody just pointed the whole package in a different direction and discovered it had been capable of that the entire time. Now here's where I want to be precise, because there are real engineering limitations in this system that the excitement around it tends to skip past. The AGM-114L carries a tandem-shaped charge warhead, purpose-built to punch through a tank's reactive armor and then continue through the hull underneath. Well, a traditional surface-to-air missile typically carries a fragmentation warhead paired with a proximity fuse, so it doesn't need to physically strike the target at all. Just detonate nearby and fill the surrounding air with fragments. Nothing in the publicly available material on the standard AGM-114L describes it as being able to carry that kind of air defense proximity fuse. Unless Ukraine is running some undisclosed modified configuration, this system is likely leaning heavily on a direct hit, or extremely close terminal pass, rather than a forgiving fragmentation blast. That makes guidance accuracy the entire ballgame, folks. A shaped charge warhead that misses a drone by several meters accomplishes nothing. That limitation shapes the honest target list. Shahed and Duran series drones, Jabera decoys, larger reconnaissance UAVs, slow fixed-wing drones, and maybe Russian helicopters, with possibly some low-flying conventional aircraft under favorable conditions. Cruise missiles are the actually uncertain edge case here. Some coverage has claimed Hellfire simply can't catch cruise missiles because they're too fast. But that's not quite right. Ballistic missiles are too fast, but a Hellfire can reach roughly Mach 1.3, and plenty of Russian land attack cruise missiles land attack. Strategery. We're gonna get them terrorists. Land attack. I do that because I say the word land like a Texan. Well, I mean, I am from Texas, but I don't sound like a Texan except for certain words. Land is one of them. Anyways, plenty of Russian land attack cruise missiles fly subsonic, meaning a crossing intercept geometry could theoretically produce a real shot under the right conditions. The harder problem for cruise missiles isn't raw speed at all, it's detection range. How quickly the seeker can lock on, how much maneuvering energy the missile has left in the terminal phase, and the fact that it's carrying an anti-armor warhead rather than a purpose-built air defense charge. Now, RADA's own published detection range, the radar, varies sharply by target type, reaching up to 100 kilometers for heavy aircraft, 45 kilometers for medium drones, and only 5 to 10 kilometers for small mortars or rockets, with cruise missile detection claimed around 15 kilometers. Stash probably shouldn't get marketed as a dedicated cruise missile defense system without real combat evidence behind that specific claim, and that caution is a legitimate engineering concern, not a dismissal of the system. But there's also a cost reality worth naming honestly here. A fully loaded Hellfire runs well into the six figures once support and integration costs are factored in. Against a Shahed that cost Russia tens of thousands of dollars, that math doesn't favor the Interceptor, but air defense was never really a comparison between the missile's price tag and the drone's price tag. It's a comparison between the missile's cost and whatever the drone's about to destroy if nothing stops it. And older AGM-114L stocks already sitting in Western inventories carries a different kind of value than a fresh production order would. That money is already spent. Those AGM Hellfires are already sitting in storage. So Ukraine's live question tonight isn't what the missile originally cost, it's which interceptor actually exists right now to fire. The Hellfire family has now flown off helicopters, drones, ships, and ground vehicles, engaging tanks, boats, buildings, and now aircraft. That's not a series of isolated improvisations. It's a pattern. The Army's intended successor, the Joint Air-to-Ground Missile, or JAGM, blends radar and laser guidance in a single weapon, and Lockheed Martin demonstrated JAGM firing from a vertical ground launcher against a drone earlier this year, which tells you the next generation is drifting even further away from the rigid label describing what it's supposedly for. The direction this points toward is a future where missiles increasingly function as common effectors wired into whatever sensor happens to find the target first. A radar spots the drone, a command system assigns whichever weapon is closest and compatible, the nearest launcher fires it, and the missile's original service branch and intended launch platform become irrelevant historical footnotes rather than defining constraints. Ukraine didn't invent that idea. It's simply the country currently proving under real wartime pressure and real interceptor shortages that the idea works. Stash's precise fire control integration, exact detection to launch timeline, and real combat intercept record haven't been independently published in detail, and treating some of the technical sequence described here as anything beyond educated reconstruction from my own experience and public information would overstate the certainty. But the bottom line here is that Ukraine's MacGyver army has integrated Hellfire into their layered air defense system, taking some of the pressure off other areas of it. No, Stash cannot do Patriot's actual job. It has no answer for incoming ballistic missiles like an Iskander or a Kinzhal. That engagement envelope belongs to Patriot alone. This system, though, fills that very real, very specific gap against jet-powered Shahed and Duran variants. And I keep thinking about that twinkle in my old commander's eye that day at Fort Campbell, the pure joy of a young company commander getting to point 3 Apaches at a bunker like he'd been handed the power of Zeus. He'd have laughed at the idea of that same missile decades later strapped to a Dutch cargo truck, hunting an Iranian-designed drone over a Ukrainian tree line instead of punching through a bunker wall. I still got that 8mm tape, by the way, from that exercise in a box. One of these days I need to dig them out, digitize the footage, strip out the Metallica soundtrack that I added, because Metallica is extremely litigious, and actually watch the moment that missile first proved what it could do. Whenever I find and digitize those 8mm tapes, you'll be the first to know. And in the meantime, somewhere over Ukraine tonight, that same missile is proving it all over again. Just pointed in a direction nobody at Fort Campbell in the early 2000s would have guessed. That's it for today, my friends. If this was useful, please hit that like button. It makes this go further out into the interwebs. And if I've earned your trust, feel free to hit that subscribe button. I cover this stuff 4 times a week right here on YouTube. And for slightly deeper analytical coverage, I write over on Medium. Check me out over there. Just find Wes O'Donnell. Thank you for being here. You are looking fabulous, by the way. And as always, glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes. Crimea is Ukraine.